Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at the Lionsteel Thrill, which has actually been around for a while, and I've actually been curious about it for a while, but just it was one of those knives where every time I had a chance to pick it up, somehow something else came up. So thankfully, I've been able to spend a little bit of time with this, and I have to say, I've been really impressed. I've enjoyed this knife a lot. I've enjoyed a bunch of line steels lately, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Although, let me say, I'm not a big fan. I don't consider myself a huge line steel fan. I do like a lot of their stuff, but then they have some other stuff that just could not possibly interest me less. So, this is not one of those. I was very interested in this, and I have to say, this has got to be one of the coolest slip joints probably in existence. I'm not usually a slip joint guy, but this is really, really cool. It's a little smaller and perhaps doesn't have the capability of some of the knives that I like to carry. And so for me, this is primarily a backup knife, a knife to, use when there's sheeple around. Not only that, but this is a knife I think that could get non-knife people interested as well, because this has a lot of cool stuff going on, and we're going to talk about all of that as we move through here. Let me just say that the way I like to carry this is combined with something like this. So this is my EDC today, and to clip this in a back pocket or somewhere else works really, really well when you're carrying something a little larger. So that's where I find, for probably a lot of you guys watching who like bigger stuff like me, that's how this may work for you. And otherwise, I mean, if you just like cool stuff, I think you're going to like this. Let's start off with size and weight. Oh, by the way, this is the aluminum version. There is a titanium version if you want to pay more, about $100 more for essentially the same knife with just a cooler material. And if you do, that's your prerogative. 7 1/16 is the overall size on this. 3 1/8 inch blade, 3 15/16 on the handle, 3.5 inch grip area, and 2.4 ounces. So very, very small, lightweight, not noticeable knife at all. And I guess it's not that small. 7 inches is not really, really small, but for me, I normally carry, my sort of rule of thumb is it's got to be 8 inches or more, or I'm really not interested. So this feels really, really small for me. In terms of grip area, I'll just give you a quick look there. So I can get 4 fingers on this. And in terms of the clip, I'll wait till I get to, sort of the handle discussion to deal with this, but it's definitely going to be single position. I don't know if that matters as much on a slip joint because it's two-hand opening anyway, but that is what it is. Let's go ahead now, and we've got that little bit of size and weight stuff out of the way, talk about the blade. So what we have here is a satin finish. Hold on, let me get the fingerprints off there. There we go. So what we have here is a satin finish in a drop point blade. Nice top swedge here, flat grind, a full flat grind. All right, now this is M390 from Lionsteel, and I know people are going to freak out below about this. Lionsteel has crappy M390, blah, blah, blah. It's performed really, really well for me, and my M4 has as well. Could it be that it's 58 or 59 Rockwell instead of 62? Could totally be. I would say M390 hardened to 58 Rockwell is still pretty stinking good steel and going to outperform a lot of other options. But yeah, it may not be hardened optimally. Now, by the way, I'm assuming that Lionsteel has probably addressed that problem because it did become quite a story a couple years back. So in terms of actual cutting power on this knife, this blade works really, really well. It did come to me with a toothier edge than I like. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I like to have a bit of a smoother edge. So I did clean it up a little bit. And since that time, I've only really touched it up, and it's performed very, very nicely. I could have this just a teeny bit thinner behind the edge. It's not bad at all, but I feel like a small knife where you're not going to be hard using it, you can maybe get away with a slightly thinner grind and make it just a little more sort of dainty, if you will. Again, I'm not, that's not really a complaint. It's just, because it hasn't affected performance at all, but it's just one of those things that I feel like, they could have gone quite thin with this. So yeah, I like this blade. I like the design. I like the look of it. I like the functionality. Being 3 inches, it's a little shorter than I'm used to. And so I find I have to be a little more aware of how I'm cutting. And that I think just comes with, you get comfortable with a certain blade length and you're using it all the time. And when you have something shorter, you pull it out and you're like, wait, what's happening right now? So I don't think that's a fair complaint. If you're always using a 3-inch blade, you're probably totally used to that, and it's going to feel absolutely natural and normal to you. Let's talk about the action a little bit because this is something that is pretty darn cool. So a slip joint, I'm not going to try and get into, walk and talk and pull. Normally I like to sit down when I talk. And so I'm going to get confused if I start walking and talking. But I will say, to give you an idea, this is a little harder to pull out than, say, this knife here. This is a Swiss Army knife. So if you've got a Swiss Army knife and you're familiar with that, this is just a little bit stiffer than that, although a little easier to access that blade as well. The half stop and full open as well as full close are a little snappier. It's, I'd say it's a pretty balanced knife. I don't have a lot of experience with slip joints, but having the Manly Companion, I had that knife for quite a number of years. I think I've even had two of them. It's very stiff, and so it's going to be like whack, right? It pops into place. This isn't quite as stiff as that, but it's still very authoritative and very satisfying. All right, so that's how I would describe that pull or that the action on this. I will say there's a couple interesting things here, and I want to start kind of going into some of those cool details. Make sure I've got a flashlight nearby. Yeah, I do. So first of all, here is the back spring. Notice that it's milled from still that one piece of aluminum, but they did put a stainless steel insert here where the blade tang impacts over and over again. That's a great touch, very thoughtful, very helpful. Glad to see that. Flip over to the other side, and let me get a light here. If we shine the light in there, let's see, there we go. Hopefully you can see that. There's this really interesting milling happening inside, and that I have to say is very, very impressive. You can see the internal stop pin right there. There's the screw for it. All right, so I'll just point that out and look at the work that's been done to get that lock spring to work the way that they want it to. I have to say that is really, really cool and really, really impressive. All right, so a lot of little interesting details here. One thing that I should add as well, and this is an interesting choice, I guess, this is on bearings. So, and I mean, I don't think it really matters what the pivot bearing is. I'm not sure why they chose to go with bearings, but it definitely is. If you watch, there's actually a Lionsteel video of assembling these knives, and you can see them pop the little bearings right in there. So very, very cool knife. I mean, very, very cool engineering and thoughtfulness that's gone behind getting this to function well, and it really does. And just that alone, you can, just the way this action works and the way they've gotten everything done here is truly, truly impressive. And if you're, someone who is impressed by how things are made and put together, this is something that you should be impressed by. It's really, really cool. All right. Functionally, I think we've already kind of handled that. And I guess the only thing I should point out, and I didn't really talk much about, is the half stop there is, pretty good. And there is just a little bit of like movement here before that spring engages. So watch the back spring. Notice how it's not moving yet. It's not until I get to there that you can start focus you. There you go. So you can start seeing that. So there's a little bit of uptake. I don't know. It's sort of like trigger creep in a firearm. If you know what I'm talking about with that, there's a bit of movement there before you start to engage. I don't want to talk too much more about that. I don't know. Again, I'm not a big slip joint guy, so I can't say a ton about all of that stuff. I'll leave that to those who are, really, really into that aspect of the hobby. Let's go ahead now, though, and talk about the handle. Again, we've sort of talked about this a little bit. Of course, this is all milled from one single piece of aluminum, which is so, so cool. We've got a really neat bit of texturing here. And I have to say, in hand, it feels just right. Like there's enough texturing that I feel like I can confidently say that I can hold on to this and do what I need to do. There is a little bit of jimping here on the back of the lock spring there, or not on the lock spring, but on the back spring there. And well, I normally have my finger up here because, this is a fairly small knife. If you kind of back up, you can, it is somewhat grippy. Nice crown spine. I didn't mention that when we were talking about the blade, but also I'll mention it as an ergonomic point. Really nice if you're doing this kind of cutting where you're using your thumb to support the blade, or your finger gives you a little bit of a spot to find some comfort there. In terms of The clip, that's the next big thing we want to talk about. Pretty stinking cool. So what happens is you push on this button here, there's a spring in there, and it releases the clip from the other side. Now there is a bit of movement here, which is kind of critical. So this clip can wiggle around a bit, which allows it to go into pocket pretty well, at least in my experience. You know, whether I've been wearing jeans or 511s or dress pants or whatever, this tends to work out pretty well. And I think it's largely, you know, when you initially push it out and you're like, oh, that's not far enough. But as soon as you try to put this in pocket, it works. And I think it's because there's that bit of movement that allows for that to work the way it needs to there. So again, another cool touch, really interesting feature. Lionsteel's done this on a couple of other knives, you know, so, but one of the reasons I wanted to pick this up is because of that feature and really to see how it worked and what it was like. Very, you know, the whole construction and design and engineering of this is probably the coolest part about it, right? Are there other, you know, equally functional, handy cutting tools? Yeah, absolutely there are. But what makes this one stand out are all those little interesting details that it has going on. And again, not only, you don't have to be a knife guy to appreciate this knife. It's really, really interesting for just about everyone. So from that standpoint, from an ingenuity standpoint, I think this is a huge win. Otherwise, you know, for ergonomics and functionality, everything does what it's supposed to do about as well as you would want it to from a knife of in this price point. All right, so let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. This is not something that I have a lot of similar knives for, but I'll throw in a couple here. So I've got a couple of Victorinoxes. Here is the Forester. I'll throw that guy in. Now this is a locking knife, so it's a little bit different, but you know, sort of still has some of the same helpful features. You know, you've got the back spring there, and again, a pretty handy knife if you're going to be around people, as it's not too troubling. The Swiss Champ here, which doesn't make any sense because it's just too big and bulky and insane, but probably people are familiar with this size of Swiss Army knife. Let me throw in a couple of, you know, sort of more contemporary knife guy examples. So there is the WE Knives, or I guess Civivi Rustic Gent, a bit of a traditional design, backlock instead of purely a slip joint. And I will say this, the pull on this is quite a bit softer. All right, so if you have one of these and compare, you know, the back spring here is definitely stiffer on the Lionsteel than the Civivi. What else have I got? You know what? I'll throw one more knife in here that sort of, I put these two together in a different video as well when I talked about sort of the modern traditional trend. This, of course, is the Spyderco Swayback, based again on a more traditional design. So hopefully that gives you enough context to have an idea of size and how this might fit in your collection, and even some comparable options. I will say the Rustic Gent is rather impressive out of all of those, and would be, you know, I think in a similar vein to this. What do I think of this knife overall? Well, if you've been listening at all, you know I'm a fan. All right, is this the most perfect knife, and is it for everybody, and do I carry it alone every single day? No, I don't. For me, this is a backup knife. It's a little smaller than what I want, and of course, I prefer a knife that locks. But as a knife enthusiast, I love this thing. As a bit of a gear nerd, again, totally impressive. And as someone who likes functional cutting tools, yeah, this does the job. It absolutely does, and works really well for me as a backup knife if I'm going to be taking my knife out in a crowd that maybe doesn't know me, or you know, I'm wondering how comfortable they are with me carrying something big and you know, a little aggressive like this guy. So for all of those reasons, I like this. I can easily recommend it. And have to say, yeah, I've enjoyed this one an awful lot. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check those channel sponsors. Last time I was on White Mountain Knives, Justin did have some of these in stock, and of course you could save yourself 10% using my discount code. I'll throw Southern Edge Knife Works in there as well, because they have had these. I don't think they have them in stock now, but you could probably kind of watch their catalog and in that way save 15% off. Okay, so there you go, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.